evidence that was adduced before you, which becomes relevant to the testimony of Mr. Mazibuko. You'll recall, Chair, that Mr. Sinton previously gave evidence that the advisory firms, McKinsey and Regiments, they did strike a deal with one Mr. Salim Issa and Mr. Kuben Mutli, in terms of which Mr. Issa and Mr. Mutli would be paid the so-called introductory or the facilitation fees in order where they were facilitating the awards of contracts by Transnet to McKinsey and Regiments. And Mr. Issa and Mr. Mutli would then receive those introductory fees through their own vehicles. In this regard, it was Homix and Chivita. You would recall that that's what Mr. Sinton told you. This appeared to be a modus operandi, Chair, as you have heard from Mr. van der Westhuizen, who also testified before the Chair that and dealt with the spurious contracts between Neotel and Homix, in terms of which funds were also paid to Homix for facilitating those dubious contracts. Also relevant, Chair, was the evidence of Mr. Sirumedi, who testified about the agreement between Mr. Salim Issa and China South Rail, wherein also he used his company Tequesta in order to obtain a substantial fee of what was termed a success fees, Chair. And we want to locate the evidence of Mr. Mazibuko, independent from him being an employee of Transnet, and simply to talk about the experiences and investigations that were conducted by SAB in relation to Homix, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, we are ready to lead the evidence of Mr. Mazibuko. May the witness be sworn in.
Thank you.
Please state your full names for the record.
Shiwa Elijah Mazibuko.
Do you have any objections to taking the prescribed oath?
No, I don't have.
Do you consider the oath to be binding on your conscience?
Yes, it does.
Do you solemnly swear that all the evidence you will give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, please raise your right hand and say, "So help me God."
So help me God.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Mazibuko, in leading your testimony, we'll be referring to a file that has been placed before you. You'll see that it's being marked as Exhibit B12. Are you having a right file before you?
It will be marked on the spine.
On the
as
spine,
BB12.
you'll see that it's being marked BB12.
On the outside, on the
Yes,
spine, is
on
it
the
not
outside.
marked BB12? It looks like it's not marked.
If you turn to the file itself, there must be a cover page. On
But
the
are we
first
sure
page.
that she has got the right
I
file?
hope so, Chair.
Yes.
Yeah. If Ms.
Do you
Malifa
want
might
to
assist,
check
just to
that?
check that you have
And then it
the
must
right
be
file,
marked.
because there have been two witnesses today.
And it
Just
must
want
be
to make sure.
marked. Yeah.
Where is the commission?
Oh, yes. That's fine. If you tend to, oh. Is that one marked, Mr. Mazibuko?
It is marked BB12.
BB12, yes. And then maybe while you are still in that file, I just want to make sure that we will be singing from the same hymn book, me and you. Let's just go to,
Will he need the other one, or should he put it away?
he would need another one,
Oh, he
Chair.
will
Maybe
need
it's
it,
the one that
okay.
is prepared.
All
Maybe
right.
for introductory purposes, Chair, we will
Yes,
simply.
Mr. Mazibuko, you want to say something?
Yes, Chair, that the ones that I've got, I've made some notes somewhere, so
I might be lost sometimes, but I
Oh,
believe that it is similar.
Oh, okay,
Yes.
well, if there is something that will help you, you can look at that one and still use this one for all the page
Okay.
numbers, because we don't want to talk about different pages.
Mr. Mab-
Noted, Chair.
Yes,
Yes.
Mr. Mazibuko, go to page 1 of that document. You'll see that the pages are marked on the top right-hand side.
Yes,
Are you able to identify that document for us?
yes.
What
yes,
is that
Chairperson.
document?
So the document is my statement, is the first page of my statement.
Yes. Maybe because I'm told that the numbering are the same, let's now resort to your file. Let's use a file so that you're not lost. And then go to page 1.
So page 1 will be, just apologies, will be here because I separated my statement from
The annexures.
the annexures.
Yes,
So-
don't get lost.
Yeah.
Make sure that we are referring to same documents. Now, if you go to page 30, 30,
The conclusion.
yes, but are you able to identify the signature that appears in that document?
Yes, Chairperson,
Whose signature is that?
it is mine.
Yes. Now, are there any corrections which you wish to effect from your statement?
There was a typo with regard to some figures in terms of
Well, you
Standard
you can look at your other file if that will make you find it easier, and then come to this one.
Let me
if
refer you
that
to
will
page
help.
25.
Yes, page 25, the credits into the Standard Bank's Homix account.
Yes, and that is the only page that you wish to effect some corrections, am I correct?
Yes, Chairperson, the
Is it page 5?
25.
25.
25, you'll see, Chair, it's begins with paragraph, or with the number 7.2, and it says credits.
Yeah, okay.
And there is an amount that Mr. Mazibuko already effected the change on, Mr. Chair, and in due course, I'll beg leave to hand in a new page. It's just one number
Yes,
that is
okay.
actually being corrected. Other than that correction, Mr. Mazibuko, do you confirm the contents of your statement to be both true and correct?
I do, Chairperson, I do confirm.
Yes.
Thank you.
Now, would you please share with the chair as to where are you currently employed?
I'm employed at the South African Reserve Bank. I'm the head of the Financial Surveillance Department.
And in that capacity, what are your responsibilities and functions?
So I'm responsible for heading the department that is responsible for implementing and administering exchange controls on behalf of the Minister of Finance.
Yes. And then what are your qualifications?
I have a BCom accounting, MBA, and advanced diploma in treasury and international trade finance.
All right. Now, am I correct that your statement was prepared in response to a summons which was received by SAP from the Commission? Am I correct?
You are correct, Chairperson.
Now, may I refer you to page 2 and paragraph 3 of your statement, and please take us through the information which was sought by the Commission in respect of that summons. Are you on page 3?
Yes, I'm
on page 2, paragraph 3.
Yes.
Please take the chair through that information in 3.1 and 3.2.
noted.
I'm sorry. Mr. Mkwena, you talked about replacing one of the pages in this statement. It may be that page 2 should also be replaced, if possible. You see at the top there, you've got conclusion and then introduction. Then you've got those numbers, which I believe belong to the index.
Yes, Chair.
So
I see,
it
yeah,
might be necessary to make the index to have its own pages that are separate from these as possible so that one doesn't get confused.
I understand, Chair. Even though they flow from page 1, if you see from page 1, you have the contents, and I see that from the contents, it goes then up until page 2, but I think there might be a neat way
Yeah,
to
if
deal with
it's
them,
easy,
to
if it's easy
separate.
to sort it out,
Yes.
that should be done. If there's a problem, then we can live with it.
We have made a note on that, Chair, definitely.
So, Chairperson, under page 2, section 3, is where the summons from the commissions require the Reserve Bank to present certain information to it.
That's paragraph 3. Yeah?
Yes,
Okay.
and under 3.1, an open course reports and all supporting documentation of the inspections and or investigations conducted by the South African Reserve Bank in terms of the Currency and Exchanges Act number 9 of 1933, read with exchange control regulation in respect of the company Homix Pty Limited, company registration number 2012-176-95107, Homix in brackets, its directors, namely Mr. Tafik Shakut Haswe, Mr. Yaqub Ahmed Suleiman Biku, and Mr. Muhammad Sheikh Adams. And then on 3.2, open quotes, the South African Reserve Bank analysis of the flow of funds on bank accounts held by Homix and or its directors and all related parties, both domestically and internationally, including any suspicious and irregular domestic cross-border transactions.
And that is the purpose of your evidence today, am I correct?
Yes.
Now, you were also requested by the Commission to testify on the foreign exchange transactions involving Homix.
Yes.
May I refer to page 4 of your statement?
Mr. Masowo, just make sure that you're not speaking from too far from the microphone, and don't lower your voice too much so that everybody can hear your evidence. Thank you.
Chair, I've just referred the witness, Mr. Mazibuko, to page 4. You'll see, Mr. Mazibuko, that from page 4, paragraph 6 onwards, you tell us about the South African Reserve Bank exchange control, and you also deal about a department referred to as FinServ. Am I correct?
Yes, Chairperson.
Could you please, in your own words, simply tell the court, tell the chair, where does one locate this department within SAP, and what are the functions of this department?
I would like to maybe give a brief background of exchange controls before I go to the structure of the department.
Yes,
that's fine.
Yes.
If the chairperson allows to indulge me. Just to give a brief, because for us to understand where exchange control emanated from, it came historically, as we alluded to, the summons where it refers to Currency and Exchanges Act of 1933. It's an old act. And that is when it's a foundation of exchange controls, where it gives powers to the president in terms of issues that he can be able to take decisions with regard to currency matters, banking matters, and exchanges. So that was a foundation. And it was prior to exchange controls being introduced, I might say even around the world, because as I proceed, you'll see that the next year when exchange controls were introduced were in 1939 under the Sterling Bloc. South Africa was still part and parcel of the Sterling Bloc, or what is called now a Sterling area. and it was at the start of the Second World War. I think we need to note this, that there was a crisis, and you'll see as I proceed how actually exchange controls have evolved, especially during crisis periods, to help. So South Africa was part of the Sterling bloc during the start of the Second World War, and they formed the Sterling bloc to protect and conserve the limited currency, because that's what happens during the war, that countries will not all be able to trade and be able to accumulate a currency. So South Africa, Australia, a number of countries, Bahamas and all that, were part of that bloc. And then the war continued, and when the war ended, most of the countries, even Australia in 1967, left the bloc. I think even the British Empire in the early 70s, left the bloc. But South Africa continued to actually apply, on a limited scale, of course, these exchange controls with the rest of the world into the 1950s. And then come the 21 March 1960, another crisis in the country, the Sharpeville massacre, that led to the huge outflows of money out of the country. And the regime of the time had to do something to try and stem the flows. And one of the things they could do was to actually have the regulations put in place to be able to prohibit South African residents to be able to actually take money out of the country. And hence it was then that when we could talk about exchange control regulations of 1961, it was just after the upheaval of Sharpeville in 1960. And then from there, they evolved because these are the regulations. Regulations by nature, they do have the force of the law. They are not the law, but they are actually created under statutes, and therefore they are enforceable. They even contain penalties for violations. Now, and then South Africa proceeded with them. The issue of that passed, but the economy after that was weakened because it was starting to have sanctions and problems in terms of the balance of payment. Up to the point of 1985, where we had another crisis again, where we had what is called a debt standstill, where the balance of payment came under immense pressure. So South Africa's external position was very much precarious, that we could not be able to pay our external debt. And the president of the time, if you remember, it was from FW to PW. I mean, from PW to FW, where actually a debt standstill was declared in 1985. It was uplifted in 2002. So during that period, South Africa could not be able to pay the external debt to non-residents. And then, we continued again with the exchange controls. But I must highlight that, there was a commission in 1979, which I left by the Cook Commission on Exchange Control, where it was highlighted and recommended that they must be liberalized over time in a gradual approach. So it should not be a big bang. So they were still there, but liberalization process, because South Africa's economy and the structural economy was still very weak, trying to build the economy and trying to protect and build the South African reserves at that particular time. So they were maintained, and then as I alluded to 1985, and then came 1994, the new democratic government took power, but the structure of the economy was still not very strong. But a decision was taken now to actually adopt the regular relaxation over the years, that it cannot be a big bang. Look at the structure of the economy, macro financial stability of the country, and be able to take it along as the country's position improves. And then from there, in 1995, it's when actually non-resident never had exchange controls. I don't want to go into details because there were quite some development, like the financial rent. It can take me the whole day.
No, don't.
The whole day to explain this.
Yes.
And then came the 2008 crisis, financial crisis. we were not, exchange control was not directly involved, but its impact, I think, was felt in a sense that our banks at that particular time could not hold foreign assets, except with an approval, of course. We had allowed some banks to go offshore to set up foreign branches and all that. And during the financial crisis, they were the most affected. And obviously, there was a term that was called toxic assets, that actually, that was not only peculiar to South African assets, it was all over the world, that you had to actually, out of this crisis, how are you going to deal with that? And we approached as exchange control to say, can we bring some of these onto the SA balance sheet, which you could not allow that. We allowed you to go offshore to expand your operations and all that, but you can't have a recourse to South Africa that could impact, the South African position at that particular time. So I'm just going through the crisis and the benefit of this. And then, but during that 2008, the gradual process of liberalization had taken place. If I make just one example, that before 1997, a South African individual could not transfer money out of South Africa. In 1997, the first amount was 200,000 rand, per lifetime you could take it out. This amount was increased over the years. Now you can take about 10 million per year. So it just shows the evolution of the system, how it has to be liberalized, get rid of red tape and all that. Now, coming to the Reserve Bank. This function is delegated to the South African Reserve Bank. This department that I'm heading sits within the Reserve Bank. The Minister of Finance is the custodian of the exchange control policy. We act in the advisory capacity because we deal with the market and all that, but all policy issues are taken by the Minister of Finance. And then by delegation of powers in terms of exchange control regulations 22E, this has been delegated. These powers that have been given to Treasury has now been delegated through the provisions of exchange control regulations to the Governor of the Reserve Bank, to the Deputy Governors, Head of Financial Surveillance, and divisional heads and official designated to deal in these issues. So it's situated there as a delegated function. Within this department, there are 6 divisions. I'm not going to focus on all the divisions, but the main division, especially for my submission today, is a compliance and enforcement division. So that is a division that will actually be able to deal with any contraventions of exchange control that are brought to its attention. Now, what happens in that process is that exchange control contraventions we get by actually going through a number of processes sometimes within the department, because we've got what we call a cross-border system that captures information, because before you can be able to be called an authorized dealer, maybe I must also just touch on that to say we actually give authorities to commercial banks. A commercial bank, when it's established, in the past it used to go to the what was called a bank supervision, and then once it's got a license, it will come to us to request to trade in Forex. You cannot in South Africa just come and trade in Forex. They're regulated asset class that we need to deal with.
Maybe before you go there, maybe educate us as to what are the instruments that would ordinarily govern, exchange control, so that when you now, testify about other issues, they can neatly tie up with that evidence. Yes.
The whole instrument is the exchange control itself, if I may put it that way, yes, Chairperson, because as I spoke about the precarious external position, the South African government used the instrument which was called exchange control to deal with the non-payment of debt and all that. Now, so the exchange control regulations, which then what we actually did to the banks after they've been authorized, we gave them authority, we gave them permissions, we gave them limits for which to be able to deal with their clients without coming to the central bank. That was meant to actually reduce red tape, because in the past, most of the applications were coming. Now, you've got banks that have been authorized, as I said, that when you're a commercial bank, you cannot just be authorized. Now there's a PA. If they give you a license, you can just tomorrow decide. There are requirements, reporting requirements, that when you are actually an authorized dealer, you must be able to report so that cross-border transactions must be monitored. And this department actually monitors a cross-border transaction. And why do we monitor them? Is because we want to make sure that, exchange controls, regulations, requirements, that actually, because by nature, they are very prohibitive. So, and it's only through exceptions that we grant, or Treasury has granted to the Reserve Bank, and it was then cascaded down to the banks, and then we have given it to the authorized dealers to say, you can only do this for your customers so that you don't actually, you make the system very much efficient, you don't come to us. So there's what is called a currency and exchanges manual for authorized dealers. So the banks, when you come to travel, I made an example the other day to some person that it touches everybody. You go to the airport to buy a ticket, you are traveling to Europe. There are rules into the manual that says that bank, before it sells you currency, what it should look at. It should get your passport, it should have the confirmation that you are really traveling, and then they can sell you currency. And there's a requirement that when you come back, that currency should be sold back to Treasury. So you go back to the bank, you are given 60 days prior to travel, whether for hedging or whatever, for exchange rate risk, to be able to assess your situation, whether you want to buy dollars now, traveling in August and all that. But when you come back within 30 days, you need to sell it, because South Africa is a rand monetary area. You won't keep dollars, so authorized dealers are authorized to sell and buy a foreign currency.
May I refer you, Mr. Mazibuko, to page 5 of your statement, starting from paragraph 10,
Yes.
where you outline the transactions prohibited by the exchange control regulation. Can you please take us through that?
Yes. So so when you buy a foreign currency, you buy it for a purpose. When you go to the bank, you don't just buy a foreign currency. You buy it, you say, like I made an example of traveling. So you are traveling, so they'll give you foreign currency for your travel. And then for your import transaction, you'll say, I've ordered goods offshore. I need to actually to pay the supplier. That is that purpose. Should you use it for something else, it is a contravention. So it's used for the purpose that you actually applied for. But also taking the currency out of the country without authorization. Now, if you go to the airport, we work together with some state agencies. You'll see that as I proceed, we work with SARS. We are not there as a financial surveillance, but if you are traveling, there are customs officials at the ports of entry, which they can stop you and ask you, and they can search you. If they find foreign currency, the question they will ask you to say, where did you get it? And then you need to explain. And then, because as I said, this is the rand monetary area. It's South Africa. We are using rand. And you say, I bought it from one of the banks. They say, okay, can we have a receipt to show to us? If you don't have, that money, unfortunately, will be confiscated. And then we've got what we call airport cases. We fetch these monies from time to time that are confiscated from the people that are actually carrying this money illegally. So, and then there's what is called Section 1T, Section 10(1)(c), exporting of capital. Now we're talking about big companies here that could actually export capital without authorization. And if you do that as well, you're going to set an operation offshore without us knowing. If you are caught, because the regulations in terms of, there's what is called Regulation 6, which talks about repatriations, that whatever money that you take offshore, you earn it, you repatriate it, and you bring it back. If you don't, you are actually violating. So 10(1)(c) says even the IP, you cannot just sell it, assign it, because it's a South African intellectual property. South Africa is either it gains money out of it. You cannot just an IP develop in South Africa and then actually take it offshore without South Africa gaining anything. So these rules, they work that way. They are so broad because, here where in page 5, Chairperson, we highlighted just few things. They work in terms of falsification of information. They give us powers to block, an account, we can block an account immediately where we perceive there's a suspicion of actually a contravention of exchange control. And so it gives us those broad powers that we can be able to use those powers to try and make sure that people comply with actually the exchange control regulation.
Yes, and from, page 6, if you may go there from paragraph 13, you address a question of the authorized dealers
Yes.
who may execute foreign exchange. I mean, you did touch on it, but
Yes.
please, can you, elaborate on that aspect?
Yes, yes, Chair. So as I said that, so this regulation says the cascading process, Minister, Reserve Bank, but the Reserve Bank is only one central bank in a country. You need footprint in terms of people that will make business to tick and move. So these are the banks, and then you give them a license to trade in Forex. But then, because of it's such a convoluted process, which involves implementation, administration, and enforcement. So you need to have administrative rules and restrictions that apply to the banks and limits, because as I alluded to, that there were limits. We have actually got rid of a lot of limits. In the past, as I made an example of a 200,000 and 10 million, that has now been expanded so much. But these are embedded in those what is called currency and exchanges manual. So each bank, as soon as it gets a license to trade in Forex, first thing we need to satisfy to the Reserve Bank, can you be able to report? You need to set up a system. We want to see settlement of transactions as they take cross-border, between residents and non-residents, because we need that information. And then from there, you should follow the manual in terms of actually transactions that you have been given the authority to be able to actually be able to transact on behalf of your customers, because they don't do it for us, they do it for their customers. Because as I said, the Reserve Bank, serves the entire country, but the footprint sits with, these banks that are actually having clients, whatever, who want to travel, who wants to import, who want to export, because you import, export, there's a foreign currency involved. And that is where exchange control hits you as a resident. And
Yes.
When I mean a resident, individual, company, or a trust, or whatever.
Maybe for completeness, you keep on referring to the manual. Chair, I'm referring the witness now to SEM5, to be found on page 244. Are you there, Mr. Mazibuko?
Yes, I'm there, Chairperson.
Could you please identify that document for the chair?
Yeah. So, Chair, this document on top is section B1 of the Currency and Exchanges Act, payment for imports.
Yes.
And
yeah.
so the under A, Roman 1, authorized dealers, if I may quote, it gives the guidelines there in terms of how they should deal with import payments, required documentation that is required, commercial invoices,
Yes.
UCP, these are international standard documentation, UCP 600, freight forwarder's certificate, or freight forwarder's a certificate of transport, consignee's copy of the prescribed SARS custom declaration. As I mentioned with SARS a little bit earlier, now, we as exchange control, we are not at the port of entry to control the movement of goods in and out of the country. However, we work with SARS. So we work with SARS, and for you to clear the goods, there is what is called customer clearance declaration, where goods needs to be cleared. But for this case, for imports, they need to be cleared after we have made the payment. So we work together, I said, at the airport as well. They'll catch you, but we get the money that actually is confiscated. They can also be able to take the money if they've got their legislation allows them to be able to do that as well.
And what are the other aspects of this document which you might wish to highlight, which are relevant and pertinent to the issues that you'll be canvassing shortly?
So as I alluded to, Chairperson, is that, so, and it goes to, because it's a manual and it actually prescribes the documentation, like the customers' SARS clearance declaration that you need to declare. So in this case, you'll see that when you declare the goods, there must be a match in terms of the foreign currency that you have acquired to pay for those imports and the goods coming into the country. There must be a match. So if you're buying these bottles, about 10 of them, then they cost 100 rand, and you have paid 100 rand out of the country, you cannot then receive the money for one bottle when you have sold 10. So it makes sure that there's a match, because it's foreign currency of the country that we need to conserve, but also there needs to be an orderliness of the market. Because I must just highlight to say, you can see just next to our borders when there's no foreign currency. I'm sure it's something we read about every day. You cannot import. You know, South African companies have suffered who have set subsidiaries offshore, not offshore, but, you know, along some countries in Africa where they wanted to actually diversify and expand. You set goods there, they must be able to, because it's an export. The requirement in terms of the regulations, when you export, we must get foreign currency back in South Africa for the goods that have been produced in this country. So those are the as I said, Chairman, this regime is so broad, I can focus on this only until Monday afternoon.
No, we won't be here on Saturday and Sunday, Mr. Mazibuko. Now, if I may refer you back to page 7 of your witness statement, from paragraph 14, you begin to deal with the Compliance and Enforcement Division, which I take that it's one of the divisions that is quite critical.
Yes.
Within SAP. Please tell us about it.
So this is the division that enforces compliance, because those rules and regulations you need to comply with. So if you don't, you know, this division normally, you know, it does investigations, but the first point of contact could be the bank reporting suspicious transactions.
Yes.
Like the FIC, there's a requirement that the banks report suspicious. So here, exchange control transactions that are suspicious, and then the investigation, there will be actually a sort of an initial investigation to say if they report a certain transaction, who was involved with, who are the parties to this transaction. And then we look, was the authority granted? Who granted the authority to all parties and all that? And if it's found that there's nothing untoward, the matter will be allowed to rest. But if there's suspicion that there's some contravention, a new investigation file will be opened and initiated from that time.
Yes.
And then the process will unfold from that, where there will be a contact between the compliance and enforcement and the client. And during that liaison, there will be some required documentation to say, we see this has happened, because, and then they will say to you, you know, provide us with the, that's why I said, in terms of the regulations, we can request to any person. Remember, the Reserve Bank, we do our work without fear, favor, or prejudice. So we can ask any person for any information that we need from you. You'll have to provide that information.
Yes. Would I be also correct that from time to time, I mean, the department that you have spoken about, I think it's
Financial Surveillance Department.
Yes, would from time to time receive information pertaining to various transgressions of the exchange control.
Yes.
How does it deal with that information? What happens once it has received that information?
So that information comes from tip-offs. So we can have somebody fighting with his wife in terms of her assets that have been hidden in another jurisdiction, a tip-off, or is something that we take from the headlines. When I sit in my office, just that newspapers nowadays, they've become digital. I used to read newspapers and transactions of big corporates. If I don't know about that transaction, I'll call the accounting manager for that company to say, I've never heard about this. How come that these guys are here, they're in Australia whatsoever? So we have found actually through newspapers, or if we found that a person that, you know, has bought a villa in southern France, you know, enjoying himself, we ask ourselves, you know, okay, did he have the money to do that? Now things have changed, because within a 10 million now, That used to happen in a fast. But if you find that we know the cost is above what you can remit,
Yes.
on a yearly basis, the investigation will start. So others are coming from the banks themselves, but others are initiated by ourselves.
Yes. Now, once that, and I take it that, there would be officials that are assigned to deal with that particular information. And
Yes.
then what do they do in those instances if, they've really found that there might be suspicious transaction?
When there's a suspicious, as I said, chairperson, investigation file is opened, and then they will go through, the whole intricacies of the transaction, the parties involved, and the intention, because most of the exchange control applications, you see what is an intention of you going abroad? What are you going to do there? And we found a lot of things sometimes that we decline because maybe, are doing something that is not allowed in terms of the current regulations. So if we found that indeed a contravention has taken place, you will be called in for documentation whatsoever, and at some stage they will do the audi alteram partem principle. Let's hear the other side to give you an opportunity, because at that moment when we go for that, we say, give us a full, frank, and verifiable disclosure. You're not going to lie to us, because our regulations are so powerful that when we apply them, we can be so stringent that we can take 100% of the contravened amount and all that. So you are able, if you come back to us and you talk to us and you say, yes, this is what happened and all that, and you start to cooperate and all that, and then we start talking to say, okay, what has happened and all that. But in some instances, when you send, that letter for somebody to hear their side and to make a full, frank, and verifiable disclosure, we have had a number of instances where people do not respond. So they will leave a 5 million rand and just take a run, and just leave it. Because I think there's more to it, what meets, to actually what meets the eye, in terms of underlying transaction to that. So that's what happens.
In that case, you let them run and keep the money.
Chairperson, remember
Or
we
you
have
pursue
followed
them.
now the audi alteram principle to actually give them an opportunity to respond. But they've decided for themselves to say they're not going to say anything.
Yes.
But we still have to make sure in terms of justice that we make sure that then we proceed to the next level to say, have they actually contravened? What have they contravened? And then we actually then start the process of attachment. Because in terms of the regulations, Regulation 22A and 22C, an official in the Compliance and Enforcement Department can block an account. So things, when an account is reported where the bank suspects that Elijah Masbu's account might be involved in nefarious activities, on that suspicion of contraventions, we can block that account. If we found that maybe there's a lot of monies that are coming in, leaving the country, and because we want to stop you and say, come, let's talk, what is happening with your, the things will start there, before we even go to the attachment and all that. And then we will request documentation. Are you paying for imports? What are you importing that actually turns out so quickly? And if you satisfy us, there's no problem. But if you find that there's a blockage and then you cannot satisfy what actually the documentation that we ask you to prove that the transactions that you are dealing with are legitimate and all that, the action gets escalated now to the point where we will show that, we will request that full, frank, and verifiable disclosure, because you need to prove us, not to us. And we give you a certain time period. If you don't come back to us by this time, remember there's an attachment that in your account, the money that is there is already blocked. You are unable to draw it whatsoever. So that is a big inconvenience to you, that if you haven't done anything wrong, you must be quick and say, this is actually what is happening, so that that account can be. But in most cases, when we do that, in most cases, there's some sort of nefarious activities that actually have taken place. And most of these matters get escalated to attachment and lead to the forfeiture, at the end of the day. Because then monies get forfeited to the state. Some people think because this department is within the Reserve Bank actually take these monies, the monies that get forfeited, and they go into the national revenue account. for the
Yes.
state to use these monies.
Yes. Now, let's move on. Let's go to page 10 of your statement, where you are now introducing a new topic, the exchange control requirements relevant to payment for imports. Are you there?
Yes, I'm there.
Now,
Chairperson.
if you can please summarize for us the important features and
So-
relevant information under the topic.
Yes, so the important features is that imports, by nature, when you say
Page
imports,
10, Chair.
they,
Yes. I just wanted to make sure that the Chair is with us.
okay.
You
I
may
was saying,
proceed.
Chairperson, that imports, so you are importing from one jurisdiction to another, you are importing to South Africa. So in most cases, it comes from the old bartering process. What I don't have, I'll give it to you, give something that I need. So when you import, so there's a foreign currency needed. You're importing from the US, you need US dollars to pay for your imports. When you are actually to Europe, maybe to one of the countries, the euros whatsoever. And then there are rules that actually govern the imports. As I alluded to the fact that in terms of trade transaction, we don't work alone as a reserve bank. We work with SARS. Now, SARS, in terms of the custom division, they want you to register. If you are an exporter, you need to register with them. If you are an importer, you need to register with the custom division so that your goods can be cleared. If you are exporting your goods, they can be cleared offshore where you are selling them. But when actually SARS says allow you to clear the goods for export, we as the Reserve Bank monitors now to say, okay, we have cleared the goods. We want within a certain time to bring back the money for the goods sold. So this section deals with that. So when you sell, there's a documentation that I alluded to in B1 when I was quoting in terms of payment for imports, in terms of freight forwarders, payments for insurance, payments under the UCP 600 standardized documents and all that. So that is paid at the requirement that, because people sometimes think that, for instance, in South Africa, because it's export exchange, you go anywhere in the world, there's a bill of lading that you need to pay, even if there's no. So when documents are crossing the countries, there's some documentary evidence that needs to be satisfied, that needs to be stamped, to show that the value of goods, its origin, what type of goods, where are they coming from. So those are the things that actually happened
Yes.
within. So with South Africa is because we've got exchange control. So we insist on these things. And if you break those rules, and then there's some sanctions that will come to you.
Definitely. And I saw that in your statement, I mean, you refer to the manual. And in that manual, there's what it's called the MRN. You know,
Yes.
if you can please tell the Chair as to what is that and what is its significance.
So the MRN number, Chairperson, it's a number, it's a unique number issued by custom divisions of SARS when you actually going to pay for imports. So it's an MRN number that it gives the validation to the importation of goods. And I must say that with the banking system, and I'm moving away from SARS, we've got a system that is called an import verification system where we can also, so the MR number is generated by SARS, you know, confirming the movement of goods and clearance thereof through the SA ports. And we use that number, if you are an importer, to actually go now for the goods that are cleared, to go and pay for those goods. And then with an IVS, we are able to even to see if there's an inquiry, maybe in terms of a transaction that is suspicious, we've got a system that is linked to SARS where we can put the MRN number and see if it is validated by SARS and all that. And when you do that, you find that it is valid. So that is the way it is, Chairperson.
Yes. And if I may refer you to page 13 of your statement, with particular reference to paragraph 31, where you begin to outline the customs clearance process.
Yes.
Could you please talk to that,
Yeah.
to those
So,
paragraphs?
I've alluded, Chairperson, 31.1 to that registration process with SARS by clearing agents, because normally the issue of trade for a local person that works, there's a middleman, which is a clearing agent, that actually help you to navigate the international world in terms of what is required between counterparties. So those people need to actually register with SARS. And then every importer or the agent, as I said, before the goods are imported into the Republic, they need to lodge what is a customer clearance declaration. So the clearance, the word clearance is that, as I said, before the goods, so you clear the goods have been cleared through customs, and then you can pay for the goods. That's why it costs a customer clearance declaration. And within the customer clearance declaration, there's a link as well, that unique MRN, they call it a movement reference number. As the goods move, that's why some of the import are advance payments. So when you got an advance payment, you start with an invoice, because sometimes the goods are still going to be manufactured. And then the supplier abroad will say, I need a down payment. So, but there will be an MR number that will be followed until someday we'll ask you to say, when you paid that down payment to say you are importing a certain machine, where is that machine when you put it? So it's an MRN number that tracks and trace, the imports.
And how does one, verify the validity of that MRN number?
So the MRN number can be verified only by SARS. It can also be verified by ourselves and the banks, because we've got a system called the import verification system that links with SARS, because it's got certain mandatory fields that it works with. So, you can try and actually GPO the MRN number and falsify it, but when SARS put it into their system, I think there will be a red flag to say this is not a valid MRN number that has been issued by the Customs Department.
Now that you have educated us, Mr. Mazibuko, and against that background, can we now move on to deal with the facts that are pertinent to the SAB's investigation?
Yes.
In relation to Homix?
Yes, Chairperson.
And the irregular, exchange, those irregular exchange transactions. You begin to do that from paragraph 35 on page 1616. This is where we might spend much more time on your evidence, because at least the background, now we know what are the requirements and what does one look at when you're looking at exchange control, and against that, either legislative important background and the fundamentals that one has to go through in ensuring that you don't transgress those exchange controls. Please then tell us about the specifics and deal with Homix.
Yes. So, and coming to this, I just need to clarify to the chairperson that, as I alluded to, that I'm the head of the department. There are reporting lines. There's a division called Compliance and Enforcement, and it's got investigators. So I was not involved in this. It comes to me once the investigation has been concluded and funds are about to be forfeited, where I will go through the motivation as to why funds are supposed to be forfeited. They check the merits of the case as head of the department, of which the prerogative also for signing off the forfeiture does not reside with me. It resides with the governors and the deputy governors. So, and that will be passed. Also, they will go through the process to make sure that, the suspicious transactions, there's on a balance of probabilities, because with us, we work on the balance of probabilities to say one might have actually a contravene exchange control, and then the forfeiture will be signed. Now, in this case here, Chairperson, where the council has asked me to start, as I alluded to that, Mercantile is one of the authorized dealers. Authorized dealers.
That is now the Mercantile Bank.
Yes, the Mercantile Bank, as we on page 16.
Yes.
Where Homix seems to be working through Mercantile for their import transactions. But you will see that there's what we call some intermediaries, what you call, like they've mentioned here that there's a Paratus. So these are intermediaries that work between the bank. It's like if I make an example with a normal thing, that if you want to buy a house,
Yes.
so there's something that is called better bond. So they will trace a better interest for you instead of you going direct to the bank. So even these treasury outsourcing companies, that's how we talk to them. So they will source clients and then say, we will get a better rate for you for these imports. Because remember, when you buy foreign currency, you buy it, in terms of, the rand, which might be volatile. Today it might be, the exchange rate might be. So they try and negotiate in terms of fees, whatsoever, and they get. So in terms of this case of Homix, they used a middleman that was called Paratus, which was a treasury outsourcing company. So
who is they? Is it Mercantile Bank? When say they used, is that Mercantile Bank or
no,
the
they
Homix?
is Homix.
Homix.
Yeah. So
Okay.
sorry for that. Now, under 36, you'll see that, as I alluded to, the matching between exports and the value of, imports and the value of money that has left the country, that 51 million in terms of was actually exported by Homix. And so if you go further, these transactions, there were about 16 transactions that were actually done by Mercantile before they could be referred to us. Could be that they never maybe suspected anything wrong with them. But then so there were 16, so they did 13, and they suspect transaction number 14, 15, 16, I think it was referred to us.
Now, when you say these transactions, you are referring literally to taking out the money outside South Africa.
Yes, so remember the import, it's a sale transaction,
Yes.
if I may put it in a simple term. It's a sale transaction between two companies, but underlying the sale transaction, there's money involved. How are you going to pay me now?
Yes.
Especially being so far apart. How are you
Yes.
going to pay me? So here, because of the documentation that I spoke about, that there needs to be documentation, SARS, customer declaration, and customer clearance declaration for the goods. And then that SARS customer declaration must bear what is called the MRN number. So here, there were some problems with some MRN numbers, was a suspicion of, especially the way sometimes the turnaround into the account was happening, that monies are moving to the same supplier, because a supplier, you won't pay them within the third day, fourth day. Normally they are paid monthly, but if I start to actually pay you very quickly, I am to say, what is that rigorous activity in this account? Why is the money spinning very quickly? And it was then we started to investigate. And then the three transactions, as I said, there was 13 plus 3, which was 16. The 3 that was actually forwarded to us to look at by Mercantile,
Yes.
they were blocked. And then the money is, I think the 3, they amounted to about 4.4 million.
Yes, but before you go, I think, the duration that you're talking about is quite crucial.
Yes,
And if one has regard to paragraph 13,
yes.
you are saying that during the period of 21 to 28 May, that
Okay.
is almost 7 days on page 30, on paragraph 36.
Yes.
Now, you are saying that within that period of 7 days, there was almost 13 cross-border foreign exchange transaction.
Yes,
via
with an
Mercantile
aggregate
law.
value
Yes.
of 51.8 million, Chairperson, from 21 to 28 May. So you can see, if I'm paying, because we know in these type of transactions, the turnaround is not like that. So it could happen, one might not dispute it between the arrangement, but it's a very unusual arrangement. So because when you talk about these type of transactions, there's something that is called a trade-based money laundering. And a trade-based money laundering, it's a process whereby criminals use legitimate trade to hide their criminal proceeds from unscrupulous sources and whatsoever. So the trade has to look legit, because when something looks legit, you know, you don't get suspicious. You know, it's a legit trade, or when you look on the surface, but if you start to dig deep into the granular information, this is what was happening here, because I think for Mercantile, when these accounts were coming, they started to realize, to say, there's something wrong here, because some of them had passed through already. That's why the 51.8 million passed through, but we were able to block the smaller amount, which is 14.4 million. But we said, obviously, the entire amount, if you look at the goods that matched the export of money, the goods that were received were about for the value of 50,000 rand, having exported 51.8 million rand.
Well, let me ask this question, and maybe you did touch on it and I didn't appreciate it. If I'm trading with somebody who is in another jurisdiction and I need to pay them,
Yes.
if I just go to a bank,
Yes.
I take it they would make me fill certain forms,
Yes.
and that they have mechanisms in terms of which they ought to report to the Reserve Bank or maybe to law enforcement agencies if they suspect something.
Yes.
Is that correct?
It's correct, Chairperson, but
In other words, would I need to first go to the Reserve Bank, or whether, even if I don't first go to the Reserve Bank, if I just go to the bank will give me forms that the Reserve Bank requires to be signed if I want to pay somebody in another jurisdiction?
it used to be like that in the past, but because of the evolution in terms of technology
Yes.
and trying to reduce red tape,
Yes.
you negotiate with your counterpart
Yes.
and you get into a transaction.
Yes.
The payment happens in the end, as I alluded to, the customer's
Yes.
clearance declaration. So
Yes.
you have that, you take it to the bank
Yes.
and say, I've got this customer clearance declaration that proves that the goods have arrived
Yes.
and cleared.
Yes.
Therefore, give me money to
Yes.
pay for these goods.
Yes.
So there's no forms to be completed.
Okay, yes,
It used to
well,
be in the past, it used
yes.
to be a red tape that was happening.
Yeah, it's technology.
Technology.
And so we come out of the state capture inquiry for now. That's all for
Are supposed to rely to some extent on the bank
Yes.
to be able to police this thing properly. If the bank is not vigilant enough, you might not pick things up yourself.
You are right, Chairperson. So
Yes.
they are the first line of defense,
Yes,
but they need to be vigilant.
yes,
If
yes,
they slip,
yes,
the money escapes.
yes, yes.
So it's what normally happens, because we rely on them. As I said, that is the footprint of
Yes,
business. You know,
yes.
they are everywhere. They are saving their
Yes,
customers. But
yes.
because maybe I must just allude to the fact that there's a requirement for the FIC. Know your customer.
Yeah,
You know, knowing your customer is saying, if it's me, where am I working? Where am I staying? That's why now when you renew a license, they see proof of residence. Are you a South African? Where do you stay? But for the business, it's also the type of income you are generating out of what type of business. You know, and how much is maybe your turnover on a monthly basis. It's know your customer, so that when you've got spikes that are out of place, those things need to be followed up, because that is where the problem is. And we have picked it up that way. But if there's no one in a bank to be able to say, I'm used to the trend in this account, because that's how the banks even monitor us in terms of they'll give you a blue card today, and they'll tell you, okay, next year you seem to be better, a red card, and then a white card next year. You get excited because you are being upgraded. But that's how they monitor your salary increase, your bonuses that come into your account to say not, and your turnover into your account to say the risk profile of this person is at this level. So we can manage the risk, and we can profile this client that actually belongs at this level. So even for companies, in terms of actually knowing your clients, you need to understand to say what type of trade. That's why homics, you don't understand what type of trade they're involved in.
Yes, okay, before you proceed, so is your reliance on the banks such that if they miss something, you won't pick it up? Or is the position that sometimes you can pick it up, you can pick up what they have missed, or you are 100% reliant on them?
If I may answer it the other way, Chairperson, it's quite a collaborative process, and let me expand.
Yeah.
So, as I alluded to earlier, that when you get registered as a bank trading in Forex, one of the requirements that we need is that you must be able to have what is called a reporting system. Every cross-border transaction, Forex transaction that goes through the bank and gets settled to the bank, gets reported at the Reserve Bank. Coming to your questions, we are able now, we've got what we call, maybe I could mention another division within the department that is called Analysis and Information Flow Division. That information collects information, but it's the information that is being pushed by the banks into the servers of the Reserve Bank. And then we analyze that information, and then we pick up trend. And I must say that, the nature of exchange control, because it is rule-based, exchange control really. So we have incorporated now, because of the evolution of a lot of nefarious activities, Chairperson, that, for instance, exchange control is no longer a contravention of exceeding a 10 million and actually taking 12 million instead of, there's organized crime that are actually taking advantage of this system and all that. And if we don't move to a risk-based approach and not just do a tick box approach, because, for instance, if I may tell you what is happening with credit cards, some banks, in terms of their business models, and to satisfy and selling products to their client, they'll give you maybe 1 or 2 or 3 credit cards. And then you'll say, this is for my daughter studying in the US, this is for another one studying in Japan. But also the family members, we have had family members that actually will say, give this to my niece, give this to my uncle. And we have lost a lot of money, because what happens, we find that there are shenanigans that go to the bank and they get given these credit cards. And the guy that remains in South Africa will just pump money into his credit cards here, and the money is drawn into, we have had millions being drawn offshore and all that. So the banks themselves, we work together, and in terms of, they need not to be, maybe they're ambitious in terms of, and we don't actually stop them, because it's not in our business to get into the business models of banks and all that. We are the regulators and all that. But where we find that they are erring, and actually they are actually compromising the South African environment to be vulnerable to illicit financial flows, we deal with that. So we are not, in a short, because I've gone around to answer your questions, there's no reliance only on the banks themselves.
Yeah.
We've got a system, because if I may tell you, Chairperson, when you go abroad with a system and you spend your credit card, that gets recorded into our system. So we always say that, with us, what happens in Vegas doesn't stay in Vegas. You need to be very careful how you spend your money, because we will know.
Okay, so you are not 100% reliant on them.
No, so it's as I said, it's a collaboration. So other things will pick it ourselves, because we've got analysts that works and pick up trend and all that. But and the banks will play their role as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mazibuko, I'm much more fascinated by what you are saying on paragraph 36 and 37.
Yes.
In order for us to really appreciate what might have triggered these investigations and what actually occurred in terms of the monies that were involved. You have already told the chair that within a period of 7 days, there was already approximately 13 cross-border foreign exchange transactions, which were done by Homix via Mercantile Bank. Am I correct?
Yes, if I may add there,
Yes.
Chairperson, so it was Homix via Mercantile Bank, but through an intermediary
Yes.
called Paratus.
Definitely.
Yes.
And on paragraph 37, you say that the next day, I mean, the next day meaning that after
On
the
the
28th, on the 29th, yes, there was an attempt to effect a further 3 transactions
Yes.
to the value of 14.4 million.
Yes.
And that's what,
And
triggered this extensive investigation and to try now to begin now to interrogate the nature of the business which Homix was involved in.
Yes,
Am I correct?
you're correct.
Before you proceed, maybe I should say that, my questions about how reliant the Reserve Bank or your department is on the banks was triggered by the fact that so much money had gone out of the country by the time you became aware. 51.8 million rand was gone.
Yes.
And I was wondering whether that was the fault of Mercantile Bank not having picked up what they should have picked up, and you were not at fault, that is your department, because you have to rely on them, or whether you would share the blame because you could also have picked it up.
So, Chairperson, to answer your question there, because this is a function that, is done by the commercial banks. They don't come to us, like you alluded to the fact that do I complete documentation? You don't complete. So we've made it easier that, don't come to the central, because there's only one central bank, but go to any other bank that is an authorized dealer, you'll be able to do these transactions.
Yes.
Now, as I alluded to that, the nature of these transactions, for them to be able to move very rigorously, in our system we'll be able to catch them. But remember, sometimes reports, they take time. You will find that, for instance, there's what is called in business, in terms of when you do the transactions, settlement is called T+2. So you only see it after 2 days whatsoever. So criminals take advantage of that when a reporting system picks it up, maybe after 5 days and all that, and states are generated, the horse has already bolted in this regard. That's why now the banks, in terms of them happening at the coal face and at the front line, they should be able to pick this up to say, this person came with a MRN number from SARS yesterday and said I must actually pay the supplier for 13 transactions. And that is how it was actually referred to us, because when they saw that this thing is not stopping just in one day on the 29th, they want to do 3 transactions, and they said there's something wrong here. And then it was referred to us, and we immediately blocked those accounts, because the banks can't block, but when they suspect, they can tip us and say, block, we can block this afternoon.
But I'm concerned that your department or the Reserve Bank didn't pick up that 51.8 million and it went out of the country.
Yes.
So now, is that because at that time, namely 2015, at that time, you didn't have certain systems that you now have which would enable you to pick things up? Or is the position that you did have those systems, but those systems only pick up after the event?
So,
in other words, is the system you have or your system that you had at the time such that in regard, for example, to this 51.8 million, you couldn't pick it up yourselves before the money had left the country? Only the bank, Mercantile Bank, could have picked it up before it left the country and taken steps. You could only pick it up after the event.
Yes, Chairperson, because after the event, it's when it is reported to us.
So, which means that there should be a system which lessens the chances that such a large amount of money can get out of the country before there is satisfaction that everything is in order? Huh?
I agree with you there, Chairperson. The difficulty with this is that because a lot of these transactions happen at the bank. Now, we deal with trillions of, in terms of the
Transactions
amount
and the value of transactions,
The value of transactions in the Reserve Bank.
Yes.
And a 51 million might seem to be, when they do the risk-based approach, that where it is being pegged, it was just a small amount whatsoever. But because criminals start small and they grow it, because if this was not stopped, I can tell you, it could have been 500 million maybe after some time. So our system could maybe be, the problem is that in terms of the threshold that we have to look at the risk, somebody might say, okay, 51 million in relation to 500 million, is not a big amount, and then you'll miss it there.
Because it might be 51 million
Yes.
with this authorized dealer.
Yes.
It's another 51 million with another
Yes.
authorized dealer.
Yeah.
And in no time, out of 10 banks,
Yes.
you have got 500 million.
And that's how they do it, because they look at the threshold,
Yes.
at which level do they start to be suspicious,
Yes,
and then you
yes.
use various banks.
Yes.
Yes.
And it may well be that certain transactions need to be delayed before they can be approved to get out until certain things are checked. But you might know better that maybe sometimes with some transactions, no matter how best you can try, there'll always be some that will creep
Yeah.
through.
There will always be some, because with the delay, Chairperson, we have always been highly criticized to be a stumbling block to the efficient working of the commercial
businesses,
system
yeah.
in South Africa. So
Yeah.
once you start to say delay,
Yeah.
we would rather improve our system to be more efficient. But
Yes.
also here, I think the more reliance was more on mercantile than on the
Yes.
Reserve Bank.
Okay, thank you.
Just to piggyback on that, you appear to be partly, responding to the chairperson's concerns, and I think you're doing that on page 14, paragraph 33. And I think that might give us a far much more better understanding as to what
Yes.
you are in fact dealing with in terms of these, volume of transactions. Maybe if you can read that
Yes.
and talk to that, maybe we'll have a far much more better understanding.
Yes, if I may read here on section 33 of page 14, where it says, on average, more than 500 foreign exchange transactions occur daily within South Africa. And sometimes this could be more than that. So the sheer volume of these transactions require that authorized dealers diligently ensure compliance with the system described above. The expeditious monitoring and approval of foreign exchange transaction is essential for the free flow of commerce into and out of South Africa. When their suspicions are aroused, however, so when we say they, we are referring to the authorized dealers, they must refer transactions to the SAB for investigation. So a lot of these trade transactions takes place within the sphere of the commercial banks.
Yes, but the emphasis will be that, on average, there are 500,000
Yes. Yeah, on a daily basis.
foreign exchange transactions that happen on daily basis.
Yes.
And no transaction or no system can be perfect. There'll always be, with the best system, there'll always be some that will
Yes, that will
go
actually
through.
fall
Yeah.
through the cracks.
Yeah, okay.
Now, you were at the point where now we know that there were almost, in total, there were 16 transactions with reference to Homix.
If I may ask the council chairperson, on which page are you now?
Yes, I'm now on page 16. You have already testified about those aspects with reference to a paragraph 36 and 37, and that's where the chairperson's questions were actually directed at.
Yes.
Now, what I want to know is that surely at some point when investigations were conducted, there must have been a purpose or declaration being made by Homix as to what informed those transactions. What was the purpose of those transactions?
Yes. So
What did they say to you?
So the purpose, I would like to go further to 38 and show
Yes.
the falsification of documentation by Homix.
Yes. Yes.
The purpose was to import something into the country, but not the full amount of actually what is supposed to be imported, to match actually the foreign currency that has been bought for the bank and paid to the supplier. As I said, that there was that huge mismatch between a 51.8 million in terms of what has been paid out and the goods cleared through customs
Yes.
of only about 50,000 rand. So,
Yes.
so now I just want to take the chairperson to folder number 8 to folder number 12. It's page 306 to 314.
Yes.
Just go there.
It's 317. Are you there?
Yeah, so.
Folder number 8 is 317.
Folder number?
Folder number SEM8, Chair. It's on page 318. But I
you-
think it starts on page, yes, on page 318. Is that the
Okay.
document that you wanted to refer the chair to?
Yes, so this one that I have here, so, yeah, there's a small print. I actually want to start at SEM7, but I've got, I think, a better looking one on my other, I can't even see with glasses here, Chairperson, I don't know.
Or is the lighting not good there?
So, so I think the initial one that I got. So on SCM7, so it's all the transactions.
316, Chair.
Is it 316?
Thank you.
Oh,
Yeah, page
The
316.
Page 316. You are correct.
okay.
Yes.
So these are transactions that have been drawn from a cross-border system with regard to Homix. And so when you add them all, so you've got the rand amount and the currency amount in terms of the dollars there.
Chair, I beg, may I provide you with a better copy
Yes, thank
of
you.
this document?
Thank you. And then maybe arrangements can be made in due
Yes,
course
we
for-
have actually even numbered it far
a
much more clearer. We
replacement,
did
yeah.
pick it up that there's a problem with it.
Yes, yeah. Okay, thank you.
Even with the good glasses, you won't be able to read the one that is on the bundle.
Yes.
You may proceed, Mr. Mazibuko.
Yes, so it's a printout of these amounts, and also what is highlighted there, that what we picked up on 29 May, as I said, this goes through from SEM7. So the SARS custom declarations in terms of the amounts on the 29th. So you look on the 29th there, which you don't get. Actually, they are not there because these on the 29th, if I may just, because I wrote them by hand here by me.
I'm only seeing
to say-
date 28 and 26, 27 here.
Yeah. So the rest of the amounts there, they total 51.753676 if you add them and tally the rand amount down. However, the one that never went through the 3 on the 29th that were stopped, 4,827,740 SEM8, 4,839,870 SEM9.
You must take us through, Mr. Mazibuko. Tell the chair where exactly are you reading in
Okay,
that document.
So-
I don't see anything
Okay.
like what you are reading on the
Yes.
page that I've
Okay,
been
so
given.
let me go to SEM8.
Yeah, and explain to us, maybe firstly, what is that document, and then what are you
Yes.
trying to
So,
reflect to the chair or to convey to the chair through that document?
yes, page 306, Chair, SEM8. So you'll see the amount.
316, you'll see that the pages are right on top, SEM 316.
Yeah, okay, let's go to page 318. So apologies for that. SEM 318. So there's
Is that the
appli-
application to transfer?
Yes,
Okay.
and when you look into the deal information on your right, you'll see the amount of 4827, the rand amount 4827,740. I don't know whether the chairperson can see under the
Is
deal
that in the
information.
middle of the document or at the bottom?
Yeah, so as you come down, the first
Can you see in the middle of that document where it says Gauteng City and where it says
Yeah,
PO Box 2138?
you just go further up, Chairperson.
I must go up.
Yeah, so
That is where it says Homix.
Under the deal information. I
Under
don't know
the,
whether you can see that.
under the,
Deal information. So there's a deal information where it talks about what foreign currency.
oh, yes, yes,
Yes.
yes.
On the extreme right, Chair, if you look from that heading, deal information, then you trace it right up until the right-hand side.
Oh, yes.
You'll see that amount, 4.827.
Yes,
Yes.
I can see that.
Is that the
yeah.
one that you're referring to?
So
Mr.
that
Mazibuko?
is SEM now 8.
Yes.
So this is the one that never went through. That's why you can't see it on the printout that has just been given to you, Chairperson.
Oh, okay.
And then the next one, let's go to SEM 9, which is on page,
It should be 321.
321.
Yes.
Yes, exactly. Again, there's an amount on your far right under the deal 4,839,870 there as well.
Yes.
This as well never went through.
Yes.
So which means here, Chairperson, that similar documents like this for the 51 million annotated on the printout here, they were able to go through. So I'm just showing what actually never go through. So we can go now to SEM 10, which is page 323 or 324.
324.
324.
Yes.
And then there's an amount on your far right there, 4,803,480.
Yes.
So when you add all these amounts, SEM 8, SEM 9, SEM 10, it comes to 14.471090, the amount that was blocked.
Oh,
Yes.
yes, okay.
Okay.
So this would be the one, Mr. Mazibuko, that you have recorded on paragraph 37 on page 16 of your statement.
Yes, that is that amount.
So in order for us to get at that amount, we'll have to look at this
Yes.
annexures that you have actually taken us
That's why I'm
through.
saying that if you look at that amount,
Yes.
14.4, it is made up by SEM 8,
Yes.
9, and SEM 10,
Yes.
which never went through. The ones above on the printout, they went through, and they actually come to 51.8 million.
I see, I followed that. And then you were demonstrating to the chair that whatever purpose that might have been proffered
Yes.
by Homix in relation to this transaction, one could not be able to verify it through
Yes.
the documentations
So
at
I
your
wa-
disposal. Yeah.
I want to take the chairperson to section 38. Just
Paragraph
to look
38.
at
Paragraph 38
paragraph 38,
of your
and
statement.
I just
Yes.
want to highlight the difference between some documents there. So I mean, just maybe go to the next page. I'd rather maybe.
Do you want to go to annexure 12 and 14, maybe to make those comparisons of the irregularities? Or are you trying to convey a far much more different point?
Yeah, let me go back, Chairperson, and see, because there's a difference between SEM 14 and 12.
Yes.
Where the one is the falsified clone of the other. It has been cloned and falsified. So I'm trying to look for that so that.
Yes, but before you go there, because I don't want to lose the sequence of your evidence, it's quite crucial.
Okay.
Let's stay on page 16. Let's conclude what you were telling the chair with reference to paragraph 39, and I think that's where you neatly convey what was actually, uncovered through the documentation
Yes.
at your disposal. Yes.
Yes, yes, yeah. I wanted to highlight that. Thanks, Chairperson, for that opportunity. So, on SEM 7, I think what also we need to highlight here, because it will come out later in my evidence. The printout that you got for the transaction that actually total 51.7 million.
Yes.
So if you look that in terms of the beneficiaries of those payments.
Where are
I just
you
want to
now?
highlight. I'm at SEM 7. I'm going to come to this 39 chairperson. So I'm back to that printout that you actually gave to that was not clear, you gave to the chairperson.
Page 316.
Yes, I just want to highlight something there as well.
Yes.
About the beneficiaries who were paid 51.8 million.
Yes.
To say about a lot of these transactions were paid to a company in Hong Kong called Morningstar International. Only 2 of them were paid to what is called YKA International Trading Company.
Yes.
So you can see that one company was being paid quite a lot of money. So out of the 16 transactions, they intended, including the ones that never went through, 14 was going to go to Morningstar and 2 was going to go to YKA. And you'll see when you start to look at sole directors of these companies as to say who they are, because they've got sole directors, as to say where the money was going. I just wanted to highlight that, to say Morningstar and YKA.
They've got one director each.
It's sole directors. Most of the corporates talk, because in terms of your registration of the company, chairperson, you can have a sole director. It doesn't
Yes.
preclude you from having that. But
Yes.
what is a common thread here is almost all these companies, they've got sole directors.
Yeah.
I don't know for
Yeah.
what reason and what benefit, because
Yes.
I'm not au fait with how companies are set up. But
Yes.
in most cases, you'll see as we unfold, we go further, this person, sometimes is not only one company, but it's the sole director of 3 companies. Yes.
Okay.
Then you can then correlate that with your paragraph 39 on page 36. Is that what?
Yeah, so I've already alluded to this, chairperson,
I'm
in terms
sorry,
of
just
Page 16, Chair.
Just 1 second. Thank you.
You may proceed, Mr. Mazibuko. I was referring back to page 16, paragraph 39.
Okay, thanks, chairperson. So if I may quote paragraph 39, the
Yes.
documentation provided revealed that Homix declared the purpose of the above-mentioned 16 transactions, in brackets 13 previous transactions that went through, plus 3 attempted transactions, as being to effect payment in favor of only 2 beneficiaries domiciled in Hong Kong, being Morningstar International Trade Limited, Morningstar, YKA International Trading Company, YKA. Of the 16 transactions, 14 were in favor of Morningstar, and the remaining 2 were in favor of YKA. I just wanted to highlight.
Yes, and in ordinary commercial practice, was this usual?
No, it is not, but I was alluding to that fact earlier in terms of the speed at which these transactions were being paid on a number of days, that they are not even aggregated, because in a forex transaction, when you aggregate, you start to save on cost. But if you're going to do a sole transaction on a daily basis, so you are incurring a number of costs in that regard. And you ask yourself, why, if I'm trading with somebody, because in most cases, people get paid on a monthly basis, to say, why were they not aggregated, to say the 51.7 million minus 2, and then you pay the bulk amount to Morningstar, and then these 2 amounts, whatever. But they were just done separately within the number of days. And it is a modus operandi that you will see as we proceed with my statement in terms of the flurry of activity into the Homix account and how they move. Because sometimes when you move the money very quickly, your intention is for anybody who tries to block that money or identify it to be something fraudulent, not to be able to catch it in time, so that by the time the horse has bolted, the money is gone.
Yes. And then may I refer you to page 18 of your written statement. You know, and
I'm there, Chairperson.
and take
page
us from
18.
paragraph 46. You did mention an entity called the Paratus Forex, and tell us more about those transactions there that were booked through Mercantile.
Yes, so these transactions that were booked through Mercantile, now we were informed that they came through what is called the Treasury Outsourcing Company. As I said, it's an intermediary company that will actually source clients and promise them to get them some better rates. So as it is alluded to on the last sentence of paragraph 46, that these entities typically shop around for the best foreign exchange rate for their clients and arrange discount on fees. So there's nothing wrong in going through the Treasury Outsourcing Company. But in the next statement on 47, where we allude to the opacity, I alluded to the fact that there's a know your customer for the bank,
Yes.
for their customers. Now, once you add a layer, we have had a problem with these treasury outsourcing companies to say who takes responsibility for knowing your customer for FIC requirements. So we just was making that statement to say, and it might have been the reason why there was a delay in actually picking this up, that they were done through a treasury outsourcing company, because if it was known in terms of the history of the company, what turnover it does, who do they train in terms of the related parties and all that, maybe they could have actually arrested more of these transactions earlier than later. So there's this treasurer, and I'm not blaming them, it's part of business, but they also now, when you look at the banks like Chairperson in terms of the vigilance, now when there's a layer that is being brought in, you also look at that other layer so that, you know, it doesn't blame the bank doesn't blame back and say, oh, it was not me, it was a treasury.
But you also want to see that the layer is not being used to hide something.
Yes, yeah. It helps, as I said, the intention is to help clients, as I made an example of, you know, a better bond. If you're looking for a bond, where guy says, relax, we'll shop for you for a better interest rate. You do not need to phone the banks, go there, discuss it, and then they say, there are the 4 banks, this is what we got for you. And it does work, because I've used that before. So it's not something wrong about it, but one has to be very careful that things that, as I alluded to, credit cards issued by banks, that things that, you know, the banks or the system, we open it up to assist the client and to make the system efficient, it doesn't come back to bite us. So those are the things that you must always close the loopholes.
Yes, and I think it's important also, Mr. Mazibuko, you know, let me take you slightly back to your statement, because from page 17, paragraph 41, you neatly captured the irregularities, you know, in relation to these payments which were made by Homix to these other entities. If you can please summarize, you know, those paragraphs 41 to 45, please. They're quite key.
This is on page
17.
17.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So, and I think there on page 17, paragraph 41.
Yes.
You know, where there's a red flag. So when we refer to 2 entities, these are the 2 entities that when we did the investigation as to who actually is receiving the money on the other side, we found that it was YKA
Yes,
and Morningstar.
The beneficiaries
The
of these
beneficiaries.
monies from Homix, yes.
Yeah, and it was found that they've got a little online presence and other commercial presence. We couldn't find a track record of these companies. Not that a company with a website that looks very good is a legit. We know how many people have been robbed thinking that a number of websites, because they look, you know, beautiful and they've got full information, But in this case, when you look at it to say monies that can flow to these guys very quickly when you go into, and you'll see that when we look, we're gonna look through the directors of the company where, at one stage, in terms of these transactions, in terms of their passport numbers that are reflected in some of these documents.
Yes.
So it was a red flag that actually, because you start to worry when you see something to say, there's a company receiving 51 point, but it doesn't have to seem to have a good track record. And then,
yes.
and 42, I alluded to the reference movement numbers that are generated by SARS and can be verified by the commercial banks themselves, and they are used actually to pay when you are paying for imports. So these three movement reference numbers, which were supplied by Homix to justify the 16 transactions mentioned above. A validation of these MRNs on the, I'm quoting now on paragraph 42, on the IVF system revealed that while the MRNs were valid, the total value of goods cleared amounted. So they were valid, these MRNs, and the money was paid out. But remember, you pay out to confirm the goods cleared, that there's a match. That's where the MRN say, when you go to the bank, you say to the bank, okay, origin of the goods, supplier, value, and how much am I paying for the goods? How much did you clear? And they said, okay, 51 million paid out, only 50,000 were cleared in this. So the significance of this discrepancy is that the value of the payments made out of South Africa did not match the value of the goods claimed to be imported. Authorization was sought for 51.8 million from the bank to leave the country, while only 50,000 worth of goods were to be imported into the country. So I just want to highlight that out of this transaction.
Yes. Now, let me take you back where you were from page 18. You were still telling the chair about the Paratus Forex Solutions. Any other thing that you want to highlight in that regard?
So I just want to, on page, you say page 16? 18. Okay. Yeah, so I've explained how they work in terms of the opacity, where sometimes they facilitate money laundering. But also now come to page 49, as I was talking about.
Paragraph 49.
Yes, paragraph 49. Where it says, according to Mr. Conrad Krill of Paratus, it receives instructions for the relevant foreign exchange transaction for Homix from Mr. Biku. Now, more about Mr. Biku, as is alluded to in the brackets, will follow. He was one of the sole directors, and that he gave these either telephonically to whom? To Paratus, by email from an email address identifies as homix786@gmail.com. Now, for a company to have such an email, it becomes very suspicious by nature to say, no, not that there's nothing wrong with an email because people use those type of email, but for an established company that has got an email of that nature, raise some concerns. And then it says relevant correspondence between the FinServ department and Mr. Krill in this regard is annexed here to and marked as annexure SEM 13 on 315. Here, if the chairperson would want to go there. So these are the emails that were between the client Homix and Paratus, giving them instructions. And normally when you are trading in Forex and you are giving the rates, those type of transactions gets recorded. It's like a dealing room in a bank, that when you work in a dealing room, whatever type of activity that takes place there needs to be recorded, so that when something goes wrong, you can go back. So even here, the FinServ had requested information when investigation was happening. And it wanted the recordings, whatever, which took about a long time to be actually given to FinServ in terms of what was happening here. But there's nothing wrong here in terms of the middleman, which is the Paratus. The problem was their client, which was problematic. But I want to move to to 50, paragraph 50.
Yes, you are referring there to
Yes.
EDI releases, which
Yeah,
are
so-
provided to McIntyre. Firstly,
So the
explain to us firstly what are these EDIs?
So the EDI is an electronic data interchange. So it's a modern system of moving information between counterparties without paper. So it's a system. It's a system that is being utilized nowadays. That's why SARS uses that system. That is something I alluded to something that SARS custom declaration with an MRN, but there's what is called also an EDI release with an M. So it's an equivalent of the same system in SARS that, with a release, because the release means that I'm saying now to the bank, I've got a release from SARS because that release means that my goods have arrived. I've got the right now to pay for these imports. So I want my goods so that I can pay the supplier. And there's a difference, as I said, that between advance payments for goods where goods are still going to be manufactured. But I want to dwell on paragraph 50,
Yes.
that the EDI releases which were provided to McIntyre by Homix via Paratus in support of the relevant foreign exchange transaction also indicated that Tutuga Scissor Close Corporations had acted as the clearing agent on behalf of. So there was a claim that a company by the name of Tutuga Scissor Close Corporations has also, besides Paratus, acted as a clearing agent on behalf of Homix. So I wish to proceed with your permission, Chairperson, to page 19.
Yes.
Just to
Yes.
take this further.
Yeah.
So, on paragraph 51, we say that Homix would have provided Tutuga with the necessary information for loading on the EDI, and instructed Tutuga to attend to the specific customs clearances. So here it shows that even these companies that are treasury outsourcing companies, they do have this system installed. As I said, it's an international system in terms of the clearance of goods between various jurisdictions that you can use.
But did SAP independently verify from Tutuga whether it was indeed involved in this transaction?
Yes, from Tutuga you'll see under paragraph 52, Chairperson, where that when there was a suspicion, Tutuga was requested and asked to say whether they were involved in this type of transactions with the 51.8 million, and they said no. And then they provided SAB. That's why under paragraph 52, the last sentence, they say, in support hereof, an example of one authentic SARS EDI release notification. Now, SARS EDI release notification, this is actually the same as SARS customer clearance declaration. It's just, as I said, different systems, but the modus operandi is the same. Is you release, obtained from Tutuga is attached. Because when you get the release notification, is that paper that you say, my goods are here, the bank, can you sell me foreign currency? Because they are here, I want to pay the supply.
Yes, while you are there, Mr. Mazibuko, you then, on paragraph 53,
Yes.
deal with two important annexures, that is annexure SEM 12 and SEM 14.
Yes, I want to take the chairperson there.
Yes, Chair, they are to be found on page 330 and 339. It's important to open those
Yeah, I
annexures
think we need to
together
we open together.
so that we can illustrate the point. Chair, I beg leave to hand in. I'm not sure whether we have better copies of those two annexures or not.
330 and 339.
Yes, chairperson. So
330 and 339.
those are the pages. So
Let me
330 is SEM 12 and 339 is SEM 14. I just want to show the
1 second. I think they are legible
They are, Chair, I
to
can
some
see in my,
extent.
yes.
Yeah, I think I'll manage.
Okay. So
Yes.
so we need to look and correlate the two documents, Chairperson, so that we can see what is happening there. Now, let's just glance at SEM 12 on page 330. So you see there's a SARS EDI response notification.
Yes.
Status release. So it means release the goods.
Yeah.
And then effect the payment. Now, the other one on the other side on page 339 is SARS EDI response notification. It's the same, but underneath status ready for cash payment. So you can see the difference between the two. But I want to take you now into the document details.
Yes.
And just show what was happening here. Now, the SEM 12, when you come to the document details, although the heading SARS EDI response notification status release is different from the other one, SEM 14, where SARS EDI response notification status ready for cash payment. If you start to go into the document details, you look at the agent file number. So the better one for me is the one on SEM 14, which it looks like S115/04-68.
Yes.
It's the same.
Well, the SEM 12
Yes.
looks the same, except that after dash,
Yes.
it looks 66, looks as 66.
Yes.
66.
So, and then you come and look at the difference.
I think the one on SEM 14
Yes.
looks to me like 66 at the end as well. But you may be seeing it as 88, or I see it as 66, but it looks
You
like
are
the
right,
same
Chairperson.
number.
So it's the same number. It's
Yeah,
not
it's the same
68.
number.
It's 66.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and then you look at let's look at the MRN number on SEM 12 and MRN number on SEM 14 as well. So it's quite longer, but it also looks the same.
I'm trying
Chairperson.
to
Where
locate-
do we find it?
So the
Let's deal first with S.
So further down, Chairperson, from the agent file number, which ends with 66, you just
Yes.
go a little bit down. You'll
Oh,
find
yes, I've
MRN,
got it.
MRN number on your left,
Yeah, I've
which is
got
cleared
it.
in Durban. So,
Yes, starts with DPN.
yes, do it DBN, yes. And you see the date as well below that bill of entry release date, 2015-0403, bill of entry assessment date.
I think it looks to me, bill of entry release date looks like 2015-0413.
Yes.
Yes, and
Yeah.
then the next one is also 2015,
Yeah, same
which
date.
is a bill of entry assessment date,
The same date, yeah.
the same date. But then look on the right of SEM 14. So when you look on the right, as I alluded to, so the SEM 14 one is what was given by Tutuga to us to say it's an it's an authentic payment. So you'll see that just opposite those numbers, Chairperson, 2015, on your right, invoice number and date, on your right on SEM 14.
You say on my right,
On
they were
your-
on my left on the other one, they seem to be on the left on this one.
Yeah, so I was alluding to the bill of entry release date,
Yeah,
2015-0403, and bill of entry assessment date.
Yes.
And
that-
then on your right of those numbers,
Oh.
to me they're on my right, there's an invoice number and date.
Yes, I can see
And it
that.
starts with an INV.
Yes, I can see
So
that.
on SEM 14, you can see it come on the SEM 12, it is not there.
Yes.
Okay, on SEM 14, the invoice number and date appear to be INVA 201-50312-31,
Yes.
and below that appears 15.03.17,
17,
yes.
which might be 17 March 2015. And you say when we go to SEM 12 at page 330,
Look to the right if you're going to see
that
anything.
invoice number and date is not shown.
Yes.
Yes.
So you can go further, but I want us to go to the amount. On the SEM 14, just because we could go to a number of numbers. There's what is called ICN import control number, is the same as well, but I just want to, besides just now analyzing the whole document, it also looks the same, but I want to go to the CIFC amount on SEM 14, on the authentic one that came from Tutuga.
What number are you going to now?
So if you can just where you see in letters transport details, just above, there's a total payment customer value and the total CIFC value of 44. Yes. I want to go through those amounts.
Is that the first third of the document, second third, or last third? Help me to locate
so
where you...
above the transport details is a third number. You know,
I can see transport code.
When you look under mass kilogram of 12035 under the SEM 14, when you go down.
Let me assist, Chair. If you go to
there's transport details.
Yes.
Now I can see
just
that.
above that, Chairperson.
Oh, yes.
I just want to show you the amounts to say.
Yes.
And then things start to differ here. A number of details, they seem to be the same. You know, as I've shown that on the authentic one, there's invoice number and date is not here on the falsified one. Mm-hmm. So when you look at here, you can see that even the mass kilogram on the, this is very strange because.
On SEM 14.
So let's start on SEM 14.
Yeah.
The mass kilogram 12,035. Can you see that, Chairperson, on SEM?
Yes, 12,035
yes.
Or 6, I think 5, yeah.
Yeah, so that is the mass kilogram of goods, that one.
Yes.
And the total CFC is 44,397 for 12,000 mass kilogram 035. So what was paid it is 44. So the amount there for the customer insurance value is 44,397.
Yes.
I'm trying to correlate that with the SEM 12, where the mass have been so inflated. When you look at the one that is falsified, that goes to, you know, it's 4 million. I don't know what type of mass is that, whether even on a ship they can fit.
Mass kg.
Mass kg,
4,250,000.
Yes. And then the amount is so inflated, becomes 3,063,000, or is 36,326,548.
yes.
No, it looks to me like 393,265,48.
Yeah.
That is the total CIFC, is that
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So these are the documents that almost look the same, but they are different.
Yes.
SEM 14 is the authentic one that we got from Tutuga with all the relevant details.
Yes.
And then the one that from Homix,
Yes.
that part of that 51.7 million, that 36 million, this is the one that was used.
Yes.
Yes. So I just wanted to show that in terms of,
Thank
as I
you.
said, that when you talk about the trade-based money laundering, the falsification of documents for a transaction that looks legit, it's a process. You can see the time we spent just spending time to scrutinize the figures here, that if you are working in a bank,
And you are very busy.
and you are very busy,
You might not
you
have
might,
the
and
time.
you just stamp what you'll just take this and stamp.
Yes,
And at a
yes.
later stage, this is what happened. The money has gone out of the country.
In addition to that, Mr. Masibuko, if you
Yes.
go to page SEM 14, on page 339, all right? Are you
So
there?
I want to go, so SEM 14.
Yeah, just stay there at SEM 14. Is the one that you've been telling the chair with on page 339.
Yeah, okay, yeah, SEM 14, yes, that one, Chairperson, yes.
Let's go to, you have the two big headings on top.
Yes,
The second heading, it says status ready for cash payment. Can you see that?
yes,
If you go down there's document detail, and you have importer, consignee, then you have the homix. Can you see that?
Yes, I can see.
Immediately after there, there's an exporter, FGC. Can you see that?
Yes.
Now, are you able to see the same if you go to page 330 in relation to SEM 12? Are the companies the same?
I'm sorry, I lost you. What were you looking at SEM 14?
On SEM 14, Chair, you'll see that there is two headings. The first one says SAS EDI response notification.
Yes, yes,
Second one says status ready for cash payment.
yes,
Then there's a heading, subheading, documents details.
yes,
And it gives you importer and consignee. Then it
Yes.
says Homix P2 Ltd.
yes.
Then there's exporter, supplier, FGC commodities.
Yes.
Now, I wanted Mr. Mazibuko to compare that with SEM 12, whether the same information exists.
On SEM 12, Chairperson, in terms, are you, Councillor, are you alluding to the exporter, the supplier?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so on SEM 12, the exporter is Morningstar, no, the supplier is Morningstar International. You know, exporter is because it's from the other side. So when
Yeah,
you say
they are exporter.
Yes, from
Yeah.
exporting to SA. And then here, on the SCM 14.1, the exporter is FGC Commodities, Pty Limited.
That is also different.
Yes, they differ as well.
We can go to a number of examples, but I want you to conclude by going back to your statement, page 19, because
Yes.
I think that's where the essence of your testimony lies. Paragraph 53, can you see?
Yes.
If you go to line number 4, if you can read for the chair where it starts by saying notably.
Yes.
Now, I take it that this notably, it's now after you have now done this thorough exercise and alluded to these discrepancies. And then, can you read that into the record?
You said what page?
It's page 19, Chair,
19. Okay,
paragraph 53,
okay.
and line number 4.
Yes, so it reads thus, Chairperson, if you, I don't know whether are you there now?
You can read,
Chairperson?
I'm
Yes.
there, yeah, you can read.
Notably, the exporter supplier, customs values and duties payable differ. This was found to be the case on more than one occasion. It follows that on a balance of probabilities, the EDI releases provided to Mercantile by Homix were falsified.
That's exactly the point that you want to convey to the chair.
Yeah. But as I alluded to, this is part and parcel of trade-based money laundering by Homix.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Now, if we can move now to page 20, paragraph 54 of your witness statement, where you are dealing with the enforcement action taken against Homix. And
Yes.
please tell the chair if you're able to summarize those contents, but if you're not able to, please emphasize whatever points you may want to emphasize under that heading.
Yes. So, Chair, under the enforcement action taken against Homix, now, this is the division I alluded to, compliance and enforcement action. A letter was addressed to the director of Homix, both by email and registered mail, inviting its director to make representation as to why the funds blocked that 14 million in the mentioned Mercantile bank account should not be declared forfeit to the state in terms of the exchange control 22B.
Yes.
Yeah.
May I refer you to, because that is quite an important letter, may I refer you to SEM 15, Chair, it's on page 341. Page 341. Yes, Chair.
I've got it.
Is that the letter that you are
That's the
referring
letter
to?
that was directed to Mr. Biku. Remember, Mr. Biku is the one that gave instruction to Paratus through, a Gmail account. So the letter was directed to him.
Yes,
So
and
here
the
we're
date,
just-
the date of the letter?
The date of the letter is 2015 0729.
So 29 July 2015.
Yes.
And if you go to the heading, if you can read the heading for us, Mr. Mazibuko, so that we can appreciate what was the purpose of this letter.
So the heading reads like this, Chairperson: alleged contraventions of the provisions of exchange control regulations made under Section 9 of the Currency and Exchanges Act, 1933, Act number 9 of 1933.
As you read, please mind your mic so that at least you can be able to capture
All right.
your evidence, yes.
Yes, apologies for that. So maybe let me start so that one is not lost in translation.
Yes.
It reads like this: alleged contraventions of the provisions of the exchange control regulations made under Section 9 of the Currency and Exchanges Act, 1933, in brackets Act number 9 of 1933, as amended, as promulgated by Government Notice R1111 of 1961, 1201, as amended, Homix Pty Limited registration number.
Yes,
I
it's
need
recorded
to-
there.
Registration number 2012-176 stroke or 2012 stroke 176951-07, closed brackets, and or its sole director being Mr. Yaqub Ahmed Suleiman Biku.
You don't have to mention
Yeah.
the ID number,
Yes,
it's
yeah.
fine.
So that was the heading of the letter.
Yes, and,
Yes.
and from paragraph 1, you refer to the relevant legislation to this letter. You don't have to go through that. But importantly, page 342, if you can take the chair, because this is quite important, Mr. Mazibuko, please read from paragraph 2 up until paragraph 3.3.
Okay, I will read, Chairperson. Paragraph 2, on or about 29 May 2015, Homix Pty Limited, herein referred to as Homix, and or its sole director, Mr. Yaqub Ahmed Suleiman Biku, herein referred to as Mr. Biku, was party to certain acts and or omissions which constituted contraventions of the provisions of the regulations, of which are, on reasonable grounds, suspected to have constituted such contraventions, details of which contraventions or suspected contraventions are more fully set out in paragraph 3, infra. And paragraph 3, as referred to in paragraph 2 above, the following contraventions of the provisions of the regulations have been committed or are on reasonable grounds suspected to have been committed, namely 3.1, contraventions or suspected contravention of Regulation 2.4, in that Homix and or Mr. Biku applied for foreign currency to the value of Rand 29,885,671 to be transferred via Mercantile Limited out of the Republic on behalf of Homix, which foreign currency was to be used for or applied to a purpose other than stated in the relevant application. 3.2, contraventions or suspected contraventions of Regulation 3.1, in that Homix and or Mr. Biku attempted to transfer foreign currency from the Republic without permission granted by the Treasury or not in accordance with the conditions that the Treasury may have imposed. You said I must stop here, Chairperson.
No, you must proceed.
Okay. 3.3, contraventions or suspected contraventions of Regulations 10(1)(c), in that Homix and or Mr. Biku entered into transactions whereby capital or any right to capital was directly or indirectly exported from the Republic without permission granted by the Treasury and not in accordance with the conditions that the Treasury may have imposed.
And you refer also to those transactions. They go up until paragraph 6 on page 343. Am I right?
Yes.
Now, what I want to know, upon this letter being dispatched to Homix and its sole director, did they ever respond to this correspondence?
They never responded, Chairperson.
And am I correct that they were also afforded an opportunity to make representations?
Yes, this letter is where we want them, so it's a audi alteram partem principle being applied. Let's hear the other side. where we are looking for, because we have now identified that they have contravened to say they must come and explain themselves, and we want a full, frank, and verifiable disclosure from them. So they never came back to us.
And these transgressions are very serious, am I correct?
Yes, they are very, very serious.
Now, you highlight their seriousness also with reference, if I may take you back to page 342.
342.
Yes, it's the very same letter.
Yes.
I was just interposing to put some questions to you, but I want you to proceed with paragraph 3.4 onwards.
Yes. Okay, so 3.4, contraventions or suspected contravention of Regulation 19, read with Regulation 22. So Regulation 19 refers to false information, if I may just allude to that.
Yes, if you can read the following page.
And then 341, incorrect statements were made in declaration in applications to purchase foreign currency to an authorized dealer.
And this is what you were alluding to in your testimony earlier on to the chair, am I correct?
Yes, yes, Chairperson.
Yes, and then 3.4.2.
3.4.2, false documentation and or documentation containing false or incorrect statements were provided to an authorized dealer in support of applications to purchase foreign currency.
Yes, and paragraph 4.
On about 29 May 2015, a duly authorized officer of the Financial Surveillance Department of the South African Reserve Bank issued an order in terms of the provisions of Regulation 22A, whereby no person may withdraw or cause the withdrawal of or appropriate in any manner an amount of Rand 14,472,0475.00 together with interest thereon or accrual thereto standing to the credit of Homix in account number. Should I read the account number?
No, don't.
Okay. Held at Mercantile Bank Limited.
Yes. Now, may I refer you back
Yes.
to page 21 of your statement?
I'm there, Chairperson.
Yes.
So just before you do that, so your procedure would be you first block the account, and then you give them Audi alteram partem,
Yes.
and then if they don't respond, the money is forfeited to the state.
Yeah. Sometimes it differs a little bit, Chairperson. So
Yeah,
when we block, so what normally happens,
Yeah.
immediately if your account is blocked,
you're
you're gonna jump and
Yeah.
say, how I'm
Yes.
gonna leave, how I'm gonna pay him for my living expenses. So,
Yes.
so they'll phone immediately in or ask
Yeah.
the bank to say, why is my account blocked?
and then you
And
tell
they'll tell
them.
you it's a South African Reserve Bank because there are suspicious, or
Yeah.
it's us that you reported to you. I don't know whether they do say that to the
Yeah.
client.
Yeah.
And hence the Reserve Bank has actually blocked your account.
Yeah,
And then you can make arrangements to come to us
Yeah.
immediately
yeah.
so that you can clarify the situation.
But
as to-
sometimes
Yes.
people just disappear.
So immediately there's some shenanigans going on. There's some delay in coming to us. So in order now to fulfill the whole process of giving a fair process to everybody, we will wait until you come. Sometimes you are allowed to bring your representative, which is an attorney, to come and talk on your behalf. That you're allowed to do. So we'll engage with them. And sometimes they will promise to provide documentation. As I said, now we need to provide full, frank, and verifiable. So I'll bring this to confirm this so that it's not such. So you need to prove to us that what is happening here is not what we see.
So you take time before you conclude that the person maybe is not interested in making representations.
So when we open
If it's quiet, they don't contact you over a long period.
a long period, someday we are given a maximum time of 3 years when we open the investigation file to actually institute the forfeiture.
Okay.
If we don't, we have to give the money back.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Chair, there's one more topic, but we are still, busy with this topic. It's 4 o'clock. I'm not sure up until what time should we go, Chair? Whether the chair is going to use the helicopter
I
or
think we can go up to 4:15.
4:15, Chair.
Yeah. I understand that the witness is not available beyond,
There were days that you're not available. I can just try to.
yes. If he's not available on Monday, arrangements can be made for another day.
Let me turn my back
Oh, he
against you.
seems to
Let me
indicate-
just verify, Chair.
He seems to indicate availability, or
I'm available.
you're available on Monday? Oh, okay, okay. Thank you. I think that's very helpful, so we
It
can
is,
go up
Chair.
to 4:15.
4:15, then
And
maybe
then-
even on Monday we can
And then on
start,
Monday, we
can
could
start early.
early to finish
Yes.
with him. Maybe, start at 9?
9 o'clock would be
9
quite
o'clock would be
appreciated, Chair,
fine.
yes.
Yeah, okay. And would that suit you, Mr.?
It will suit me, Chairperson.
Okay, thank you. And I take it would suit your legal team as well, they indicate.
Chair, the legal team is
Okay.
always available. I'm sure.
Okay, thank you very
They'll
much.
make arrangements. The commission comes first, Chair.
No, everybody is cooperating with.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Now, let's go back to page 20 of your witness statement. And with reference to paragraph 55, you have already informed the chair that there was no response. We now know there was no response, but fundamentally take us through paragraph 56 of your statement.
Yes, Chairperson. So the process that I described earlier in my introduction, that then when they never responded to us after the letter we have been looking at, on 30th December 2016, a notice and order of forfeiture declaring the amount of 14,472,075 rand standing to the credit of Homix in its mercantile bank account was forfeited to the state in terms of the Exchange Control Regulation 22B and was published in the Government Gazette. So the date of forfeiture is a date when it is published in the Government Gazette, because once there's a forfeiture, when the matter is dealt with from the beginning, the public will never know that Elijah Mazibuko's account is suspicious or he's involved in nefarious activities. But even here, when there's a publication, it doesn't even state, your sins as to what you have done. We just say the amount for this company registration number, or if it's a person, Elijah Mazibuko ID number, so and so, his money has been forfeited, to the state. So people will read between the lines to say, the government can't take your money, you must have done something.
Yeah, okay.
Now, do you know if Homix or its sole director ever challenged this forfeiture?
So they have about 2 years to do that.
But they've never challenged this forfeiture at all.
So
In most cases, it's very rare that we have been challenged in the past that we have taken it to court, and because it's within their right. But in most cases, the type of Homix companies that run away, or individuals that run away when you say to them, make representation so that we can talk, in most cases, they've run. They've just left everything.
They opt to run away, as the
They've
chair
just run
said
away
before,
from the
yes.
14 million. So 14 million is not a small amount of money. We can share it amongst ourselves here. We'll be very happy for this weekend. It's not a small amount of money. But if you're going to run away from it, hey, there must be something wrong.
Well, even if you might not have worked for it, you would still want it.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, could you please summarize for us what you are saying in paragraph 57 and 58?
Yes. So in 57, it takes back the type of transactions that
Yes.
Homix were doing in terms of the flurry of transactions within few days to only 2 beneficiaries, and also the falsification of documentation that we found that actually was driving these amounts to these 2 companies. And also, I think the biggest factor is what we have just been alluding to in terms of to say, whenever it was now discovered that these entries have been falsified, the amount is blocked, when they are asked to make representation, you know, a normal company or a normal person where there's a legitimate trade and there's a misunderstanding, will come and make representation to say, this is actually the actual situation. But so they are in action, you know, are typically of the behavior to be expected from a legitimate company, because a company that is legit with a legitimate registration number, offices and all that, they'll be able to deal with it. So this one, it seems like a letterbox company that was just used to actually take money out of the country.
Chair, we should remind ourselves that these are the monies which the other witnesses have spoken about, directly arising from the tenders which were awarded to Transnet. And these are the monies that find themselves in Homix. And this is where we now know that when people have to account, they rather run away from accounting as to what are the legitimacy of those monies.
And I can just emphasize, Chairperson, with paragraph 58 to say, pursuant to the above, all the information presented, it is submitted that the transactions over the accounts of Homix displayed all the hallmarks of a scheme aimed at disguising the origin, the nature and ultimate destination of funds, in other words, a money laundering scheme.
Yes. Now, it was not only Homix, you know, as an entity that you investigated, but when you look at the account of Homix, I think that you also looked at other related or associated companies, and you're doing that from paragraph 59, page 21, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
If you can tell us about those entities as well.
Yes.
Before you do so, just as a matter of interest, when you discover, as you did here in relation to Homix and this 14 million rand, that there seems to have been a problem, but you know that there's 51 million rand that's left.
Yes.
Would you then interact with maybe the Reserve Bank of the jurisdiction where the money was sent, or with law enforcement agencies to say they must look at that money in that other jurisdiction, or alert them so that they can make whatever decisions they make about whether they will look or they will not look?
I must say, Chairperson, we have never done that, because that is facilitated if between the two countries where the money has gone, there's a mutual legal assistance.
Yes.
If it doesn't exist, it becomes very difficult even to engage with authorities on the other side.
Okay.
Yes.
But would you alert the authorities within the country, whether it's the police or it's the Minister of Justice or Minister of Foreign Affairs, the authorities who should look at the possibility of alerting other law enforcement agencies to say there's something suspicious, just have a look at here and follow up if you are persuaded that there's something suspicious as well?
We have never, I think it might be because when you start now to look at police and other enforcement across, because if you look at in terms of how we work, because we are the central bank, and some of the transaction of this nature, because there's falsification of information, they get given to the NPA. I think those are they can be the ones that will, because even with the mutual legal assistance when we were working, because I must say that we've been trying to, between ourselves and Dubai, trying to get a mutual legal assistance, which I don't know how far it is, but that is being worked over, I think, by the NPA, so that, because we work with, there's something that we have established that we call interagency working group. This involves the SAPS, the NPA, FIC, SARS, whatever. So we work together so that we can see a bigger picture, because some of these transactions, like the ones that maybe when I come back on Monday, you see them now, they are local, they are not, but how we looked at local, you say, who funded Homix to be able to do this cross-border transaction? You need to start, but from there, it is no longer our mandate. We are just looking who are the feeder accounts that are feeding into this so that the money can go out. But looking into the account now, that are actually moving within the country, it will be the Financial Intelligence Center Act that they should be able to. But I must admit that we don't write or to, I think maybe it might be, we need to collaborate more amongst ourselves to say, without maybe the mutual, because I was told that to say, look, you won't be successful if there's no mutual legal assistance between the two jurisdictions.
And then after you have found that with regard to this 14 million, Homix or its director was not interested in making representations, I guess your suspicions about the 51 million would have been strengthened. I don't know whether you deal with it here, but I would like to know whether you went to check whether that 51 million, even though it may have, the horse had bolted, whether it was also problematic as a matter of fact.
Yes, it's because the 14 million was blocked because of the 51.
Yes, yeah, but what I mean is, on the 14 million,
Yes.
we now know, based on what you have said about it,
Yes.
where the basis was.
Yes.
Did you complete any investigation about the 51 million? Or it was just picking up red flags and then blocking this one?
So had we, if I may put it this way, that, so when you do a forfeiture
Yeah,
based on exchange control contravention, you try and recoup. So we say in exchange control, capital exported illegally out of the Republic.
yes,
You cannot take more,
yes.
but you can take the equivalent and
Yes,
less. In most cases, like you alluded to, Chairperson, that because maybe our systems are not that efficient, by the time we block an account
Yeah,
for maybe 5 million, you find
Much
that the
has gone
perpetrator
out.
has taken 25.
yes, yes.
And so there's no match between the two, but it's what the sanction we can only put to that person to say, now we have seen you have doing this, and I don't think they'll do it again if you have taken a portion of a person. So even here, we ended up just taking the 14 million, and that
Yes,
is where it ended.
Yeah, okay, no, thank you.
Chair, I see that
Yeah.
there's no way that in 2
Yeah,
minutes
no,
we can
no, we can't.
do anything meaningful.
Yeah.
Maybe we should adjourn then, Chair.
Yes, we are going to adjourn for the day, and on Monday, then we'll start at 9 o'clock.
Noted, Chairperson.
We adjourn.
All right.